Oh, hello. Today we are here to talk about the recent adaptation of Death on the Nile, starring Kenneth Branagh and a variety of other stars. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I literally just got back from seeing it in the theater and I just need to talk to someone about it. I am not looking to do a whole lot of editing on this. This is going to be sort of just raw. I look a sweaty mess, but who cares, because I just want to talk to you guys about this movie. I need to talk to someone about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my general, kind of not specifically spoilery thoughts. Then I will move to general comparisons between this version of the story and the original 1978 movie adaptation, as well as the book. And then I will end with some specific spoilers for how this movie handles the book's material. So that would be spoilers for both this movie and its source book. So that's how I'm going to try to structure this. And like I said, not looking to do a lot of editing on this, so strap in for a lot of ums and likes because I'm not going to cut all them out. So Death on the Nile is a 1930 something classic from Agatha Christie, and it is one of her best books in my opinion. It's one of my favorites, and I think it's one of her best. It is what I would describe as an isolated closed circle mystery, meaning that you have a bunch of people who converge in a certain place. They are trapped there for some reason. In this case, they're in the middle of the Nile. They're kind of out in rural areas. There's not, police immediately present, and somebody dies, and then you got to figure out who done it, because if you don't, you might be next. So that is the overall sort of structure or kind of mystery type for this particular novel, which if you watch this channel, you know is pretty much my favorite trope of all time. So I love the trope. It is executed really, really well. And I would argue that Death on the Nile is in the top 5 for Christie character work. I think particularly the character of Jacqueline de Belfort is one of her best. And I think that the relationship dynamics she establishes are really interesting. It's very humorous in certain places, which is characteristically Christie. And because she lived in the Middle East, well, not full time, but for good stretches of the year, her second husband was an archaeologist, and so she would go with him. So she had spent time in this region, and I think she does a good job of evoking the locality, of evoking that kind of time and place, and evoking sort of travel of this time period. So it's very atmospheric, the character work is great, and the solution is really fun. It's a really fun mystery. Without getting into too many details, we have multiple bodies, which is often the case, but I think the way it unfolds in this one is really exciting. So it's definitely one of Christie's best. I would also say that the 1978 adaptation of this is iconic. I'm not as impressed with the David Suchet adaptation. I know, blasphemy. I love David Suchet as Poirot. He's my favorite Poirot, but that particular adaptation I don't think is the best. But the adaptation from the 78 all-star cast, it was filled with stars. And I think the performances pretty much across the board are pretty great. I think notably Mia Farrow is great in this one. Bette Davis looks like a literal actual corpse in this adaptation. And the scene stealer of this adaptation is Angela Lansbury as a drunken romance novelist. One of my all-time favorite performances in any movie. It is truly iconic. Okay, so those are the two kind of major sources for this movie. Now we get to this adaptation. So if you will recall, if you've seen my original review, hold please. I saw a matinee, and for some reason I thought I'll eat at 10, and then when I get back at 3, that'll be fine. I'll just have a late lunch. No, I'm starving. So let me go put that in real quick. That is cooking. So let me look up the cast while I give you the skinny on this. So the Kenneth Branagh adaptation, the first one was of Murder on the Orient Express that came out, I want to say 4 years ago now, maybe even 5 years ago now. And it was also an all-star cast. So I think they're trying to recreate what was happening in the 70s, which was there was a series of these very high production quality, very prestigious actors involved in, and just really good film adaptations of Agatha Christie. And some of the draw was the big names in an ensemble cast. So I think that was kind of what they're trying to do with these reboots and these new adaptations. And so that was how they approached the Murder on the Orient Express. It was, star-studded, and that is also the case in this one. So Kenneth Branagh is Poirot. We've got Gal Gadot as Lynette Ridgway, who I think sort of from the posters and kind of the marketing, she's pitched as sort of the main character aside from Kenneth Branagh. I guess that's how the movie treats her. Armie Hammer is Simon Doyle. Awkward. I could tell that I think he originally had a bigger part, and I suspect because of the pandemic and they had time to edit things that they took that opportunity to reduce some of his role. Let's see, who else are big names? We've got Annette Bening as Euphemia. We've got Russell Brand as the doctor. We've got Jennifer Saunders is one of the passengers, Mrs. Von Schuyler. Sophie Okonedo, I can never say her last name, Okonedo. I definitely recognize her as a character actress. She plays the role that Angela Lansbury played in this version, which I thought was interesting. Let's see, any other big names? No, I mean, the only other standout I'll mention is I do think that Emma McKay, who plays Jacqueline de Belfort, gives a good performance. So I will say there are definitely stars in this one, but not as many as the Murder on the Orient Express. And I will tell you that I think from a performance standpoint that this is a pretty big step down across the board with a couple of exceptions. So general thoughts on this. I think that the problem with this series of adaptations is that they continue to pick an interpretation of the Hercule Poirot character that doesn't work very well, in my opinion. All of this is my opinion. And I will also say, I am not somebody who feels like, unless you are completely faithful to the book, it is not a good adaptation. For instance, I love that 1978 adaptation. It is not 100% faithful to how the book is, but the changes it makes, I think, serve the story and serve the story that they were trying to tell. So I'm not saying that you cannot make changes to source material when you're adapting book to movie, but I would argue that the most successful book to movie adaptations they're basically interpretations. That's what an adaptation is, in my opinion. And what they do is that they find an angle, a take on the source material for their interpretation. And even if it's not necessarily something that was present in the original text, when it gets added or when it gets changed, it makes you reflect on the original text in a good way. Like, it makes you see something new and deeper about what the original text did. And in my opinion, what they have chosen to do is that they've chosen to make Poirot two things. One, an action figure. Well, three things. One, an action figure. Two, lovelorn, like that he's this old lonely man because he lost the love of his life. That sort of got set up in the first one and definitely got expanded in this one in ways that I did not think were successful. And three, full of self-doubt. Okay, Poirot, the brilliance of Poirot is that he has no self-doubt. He is so arrogant and so sure of himself. And in this movie, he even gets called out as being arrogant at times. And I'm like, he's questioning himself too much for him to be Poirot. So I don't even know why you're thinking he's so arrogant. That is just a fundamental change from the Poirot character, and it doesn't add something interesting, I think, to the story, because I think part of what makes the stories so charming is that Poirot is kind of always right, sort of like Sherlock Holmes. He doesn't really have demons, and I don't think he really needs them. I don't know. I think that they're trying to round out the character, but the best Poirot stories, he has enough characteristics. He always says he's very bourgeois in his attitude towards murder. That is what his sort of interesting take on things is that he ultimately really believes in justice and really believes in sort of righting wrongs and exposing the truth where it can be found. He's a little vigilante at some points, which I think could be a more interesting take on some of this than what they've chosen to do. But he's very fastidious. He's described as like egg-shaped. He's a little old egg-shaped man with these gigantic mustaches that he's very fastidious about. That's who he is, and they want to make him younger, more like there's another action sequence in this one that actually, frankly, is quite similar to one of the action sequences in Murder on the Orient Express. And I think what bothers me is that the reason that they're adding these elements to Poirot is that they do not trust that the audience will be interested in the story that they are telling. And friends, my dudes, Agatha Christie is the best-selling author of all time, I think, still. These books are now approaching 100 years old, and they sell incredibly solidly. People still read them. People still enjoy them. It feels like it's infantilizing to the audience. I think that's my problem with this is that it feels like they don't trust that you will be interested in just like a straight up mystery, an old school whodunit. And we would be. We are. That is the dominant thing that is on at least American network television, are various versions of police procedurals, which are basically murder mysteries. Like, people like a murder mystery. So just do that. You don't need all of this like side bullshit, in my opinion. Like, you're trying to make Poirot this emo sad boy, and I'm like, I don't need this. Like, and also the other problem is that because Kenneth Branagh is the director, I believe still, as well as the star, he gives Poirot too much screen time. Part of what works in these older adaptations is it knows that the audience is going to be interested in all of these side characters because these side characters are very interesting. Christie draws a wide cast of very interesting characters that you are engaged with. You don't need to spend as much time with Poirot as these films insist on spending, and I assume the reason they insist on spending this much time with him is because Kenneth Branagh is directing, and it's like they're too interested in Poirot. They need to be less interested in Poirot and more interested in building up the cast of characters that they have. Okay. That's my rant. Non-spoilery things that I did like. I do think that the costuming it continues to be beautiful. Like, it's beautifully shot. It's very kind of lavish in its style. I will say, I think it's a little too like plasticky in its drawing of the time period. I didn't realize that in the first movie, but now that I've seen two of these, I think their vision of the past is too like squeaky clean. I feel like the older adaptations felt a little kind of almost grimier in a way that felt it had better historical verisimilitude, at least for me. But it's very beautifully drawn. I thought that it was very smart to change Salome and Rosalie Otterborn from being a famous romance novelist and her daughter to a blues singer. Oh, pause. My lunch is ready. Okay, sorry. Got a little bit of water, took a bite. I think I was talking about Salome. Yeah, okay. So I did think it was smart for them to make Salome a blues singer, and then Rosalie is her niece, who's like her ward and kind of her business manager. I thought that that was an interesting take on the period, and it allowed them to introduce some Black American actresses to the cast in a way that I appreciated. I appreciate that in both, that they've looked for like ways to allow for more like people of color to be in the cast, and I appreciate that. And I thought that that was a smart updating because it also allowed them to introduce a lot of like really dynamic background music that would be organic to that period. So I thought that that was a smart and interesting take on things. I also didn't even hate that Salome ends up sort of like flirting with Poirot. I wish that he hadn't been like a dopey, sad emo boy who couldn't handle it. I think if like, I don't know. I was okay with that as an idea. So I liked that. I also really liked the kind of, the first time we see Jacqueline and Simon Doyle together, they are dancing to Salome's music and doing like the really erotic swing jazz dancing of the period. Probably, well, I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure. It may or may not be spicier than what would have been done at the time, but it was very, frankly, erotic. And I think it helped establish the connection between Simon and Jacqueline early on. So I thought that that was a good improvement. The dress that she was wearing, favorite look, I think, maybe in the whole movie. So I liked that. Yeah, I mean, there's moments of better acting. Like, I did think Salome was one of the better actresses. Okay, anything else positive I can say? I don't think so. Okay, so in terms of comparing and contrasting, I think that the 78 adaptation makes some changes to the original source material, but I think in ways that made more sense to me than the changes that this particular one makes. And I guess I would just say, all in all, I think that this one lacked a lot of push. It didn't feel very propulsive. It felt very, they were trying to make sure Gal Gadot had a lot of screen time. They were trying to give you a lot of vibes. And I don't think the way they structured the mystery unfolding helped create suspense. Yeah, I don't think that this was successful. I would say I felt like this one was less successful than Murder on the Orient Express, and you guys know I had some critiques of that one. So overall, I would give this like a C+, a B-. I mean, I've had worse times at the cinema. I've seen far worse adaptations. I don't think that this is like egregious. I think I'm just annoyed that I wish that they would change some of their approaches to the source material, because when they do choose, like, so for instance, okay, yeah, sorry, this is one other thing I did like. They I think take moments to try to contextualize this moment of history. So they'll flash back to Poirot serving in World War I, even though in the series he explicitly is an old man who is a Belgian refugee in England during World War I, but whatever. In this version, they make him a World War I soldier. It's not like the worst retcon they could do or the worst change. I'm not mad about that on the surface. And I do like that it then gives context of like, hey, we are in this sort of interwar period. They do have allusions to the Great Depression, which I actually frankly wish they had done more of, because I thought that that was a smart kind of angle to take. So I do also appreciate, I will say, that they take moments to zoom out and try to place this kind of the scenery in the scope of history. One last very petty thing that I hated, there is blatant, some of the worst I've ever seen product placement from Tiffany's that I found very distracting. Okay, now we're gonna move into spoilers for the movie and for the source material, so if you do not want to hear anything else about that, now is your time to leave. Okay, Gal Gadot, I don't think she was very successful as Lynette Ridgway, and I can't tell how much of that is the way she was written versus her acting. I will say that I appreciated that, like the 78 adaptation, they choose to see her mostly as spoiled and not as evil. I think that that is a mistake that the Suchet adaptation makes. I was talking with Alexa Dunn about this the other day, because it's that she's spoiled. She is careless and spoiled, and that really is what drives her downfall, is that she is blind by her own inability to sufficiently account for other people's responses to her self-interested actions. So I thought that made sense. She has there's one moment with her and Jacqueline right before they're about to enact the big scene where Jacqueline shoots Simon. And she has this moment of going up to Jacqueline and saying, you know, like, we were friends once. I know I did you wrong, but I would like if we could be friends again. I wish we could be friends again. I liked that. I thought that that was one of the only moments of like fleshing out that character that they gave her. In general, I felt like they gave her far too much time, and they didn't give nearly enough time to all of the other characters. So part of what the deliciousness of this kind of Christie book is that you have a clear sense from the outset what everyone's motivations are and why everyone might have done it. And in this one, so I thought it was smart actually, and kind of like gets around a question in the original text, which is like, come on, all these people who hate Lynette Ridgway are on this boat at the same time, like, give me a break. I like that in this one, it's purposefully set up as like, no, it's a wedding party of people we know who we've invited. I think that made sense. Because of that, for whatever reason, they didn't want to elaborate on all of the different motives that people would have. So by the time Lynette is killed, it's like, well, I mean, who did it? Nobody. I mean, Jacqueline's really your only suspect, and when she is so early on discounted as a suspect, it just makes it feel like, well, I guess any of them could have done it, but not in a like, ooh, I'm invested in like, yeah, this person could have done it because she ruined her father, and this person could have done it because she broke up her engagement. Like, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like, I don't know. I mean, none of them really seem very motivated. I will also tell you, I just think that that made the pacing of it really dull. Like, it didn't have a lot of verve to it. In my theater, I purposely went to a matinee so that I wouldn't have, you know, a ton of other people around me. This is my first movie in the actual theater I've seen since the pandemic, so there you go. There was only, I think, 8 of us. I was by far the youngest person in there. 2 people were asleep and snoring by the end of the movie. And then the 2 little ladies, who were next to me, they were like 2 seats away, can't hear very well, so their whispering was very loud. And one of them was like, I guess he did it. And then the other one's like, but how? And she said, I don't know, the little girl probably helped him. And like, basically, like, they called that Jacqueline and Simon are in on it together immediately, not because it's obvious from a sense of like, oh, it must have been them, but just sort of like, I don't really know if there's a motive for anyone else, so I guess it must be them. It just made it didn't have any of the tension of the original book. I would say that the most moment, even though I knew it was probably coming, was when, so in this version, they don't have Salome die, they have book die who I can't remember if, I know that there's a character like him in the book, but I don't remember if that's his name. But anyway, instead of having Salome be dramatically shot right before she's about to say whodunit, they have it happen to him. And I think that was one of the more successfully staged moments of tension, but it's telling that I really feel like that was kind of the only moment of tension. I felt like every other moment was very, well, I'm trying to think, are there any other ones I liked? I mean, there was a couple of clues that I thought were okay, that were different than the book, but I was like, yeah, okay, that's kind of a fun twist on this. Yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was a pretty dull movie, and considering the plot, if you know the original plot and how many people die and how towards the end you're just like, get everybody in this room because if you don't, we're all just gonna die. Like, who is killing everyone? It feels so just like propulsive, and that is just, this movie dragged. I felt like this movie dragged all over the place. Okay, and I feel like I'm just sitting here ranting, so I should probably just wrap this up. But I guess my takeaway was I felt like they didn't trust the audience. They had this moment where they had been introducing all of these characters in the wedding party to us, just sort of through showing and not telling. It was fine. I was getting to know all of these different characters, and then all of a sudden they have one character literally pull Poirot aside and tell him who each of the characters are, even though we've literally just spent the last 5 minutes being introduced to each of these characters and inferring what their deal is. That's the problem with this whole franchise. It doesn't trust the audience to be interested in the plot, and the audience is interested in the plot if you will just like give us the plot. I don't know. Okay, I feel like I've just bleh, so I should just wrap this up. But suffice it to say, I didn't think that this was a very successful film. I thought that this was less successful than Murder on the Orient Express. I think that they continue to misunderstand or not have an interesting take, maybe is the better way to say that. I don't think that their take on the source material is very interesting or compelling, and I guess I want them to keep making them because I know it pushes more people to try Christie, so that's good, but I continue to be pretty unimpressed, and I would really love it if they would, I think, just have more faith in the audience. That's kind of my takeaway. Like, have faith that people like this story and that you don't need to spoon feed it to them in a way that assumes that they're bored, because by doing it that way, you are actually making them bored. Anyway, let me know if you've seen this movie. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you've read the book and if you like or don't like the book, etc. Talk to me below. Do you like emo sad boy Poirot better than I do? Possibly somebody else does. I'm gonna go eat some lunch / dinner, I guess, at this point. And yeah, I guess that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!